country. When you've narrowed down your list, you can either send someone a message or click the three dots to view their profile. That is where you can also schedule their one-to-one. If you don't know where to start at the top. That's where we will recommend potential one-to-ones for you. You also have scheduled opportunities to network each day with roundtables. These are small group networking opportunities. They will change each day, posting specific countries for chats or business spheres for best practice discussions. These too will be available in other languages like Chinese, Japanese, French, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese. Make sure you are networking and attending sessions so you can score points in our game section and earn your Master Connector certification. As you can see, we have several badges you can win. The top performers visiting as many booths in the exhibition as possible will have the chance to win an iPad courtesy of BNI sponsor, the BNI Global Store. And the highest earning attendees for the overall event will be entered into a raffle for a new MacBook Air laptop, courtesy of Submarine Pens. Speaking of our sponsors, check them out along with our other exhibitors and the exhibition. Lastly, under the More section, you'll be able to download the Global Convention workbook or refresh your memory on how to achieve your Master Connector certification. We hope that you enjoyed this year's event and remember to connect, master, and grow.
Welcome back. And now we have our first keynote speaker for Global Convention, and he's none other than Senior Business Lead for Google, Mr. Mike Murphy. There's no doubt that over the last 12 months, we had to polish our digital skills to reach new customer. Mike is going to share with us and understand how consumer behave and think to lead to growth and through Google's business tools. Please help me to welcome Mike from Google. At the same time, we're going to go over next to our BNI member. We bring Mike over.
If you are not earning your dream income now, you are actually losing it. If you are not spending quality time with your family and friends now, you are actually losing it. If you are not the happiest person that you can be right now, then you will never be. If you believe you will have a perfect life in coming days, you are living in illusion, because time and space is just an illusion. The reality is just the present. Make your every present moment the best it can be. Be the happiest person right now and create your dream life right now. Be more, do more, and have more right now. Book your call right now. Visit gopalmishra.com/call.
Hi there. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Mike Murphy. I'm a senior business lead at Google, and I'm excited to join you here at the Bni Global Convention to talk to you today about our philosophy at Google around 10x thinking and actioning off of data and insights. But before we get started, it is obviously all about networking. And while I would much prefer to have been able to network with you all in person in Miami, opposed to my home office here in Chicago, I would love to take a moment to virtually network with you and introduce myself. For the last 4 years of my career, I've been a business lead at Google, focusing on supporting some of our largest restaurant partners and customers. Yes, this basically means I talk about pizza and burgers all day long, and I wouldn't have it any other way, as these are iconic brands and businesses that I've admired since my childhood. And I love the opportunity that I have to support their businesses throughout a digital transformation. And let's be honest, who doesn't love pizza and burgers? A lot of my job is actually focused around networking. While Google partnerships typically start within marketing and advertising, in my role, I really function as a conduit for these businesses to all things Google. Therefore, I tend to wear a lot of hats and get pulled in so many different directions, from Google Cloud, Maps, Android, Assistant, and more. Every day, my job looks a little bit different. And I love the opportunity I have to connect with so many different individuals across these organizations and partner to develop new ways to drive their business forward and lean into Google technology and solutions. A little bit more about me. I was born and raised in the Chicago suburbs, but have spent the last 10 plus years living in the city with my wife and 2 children. I, with many others during the pandemic, decided that we needed a little bit more space, as I was working from a windowless closet in my basement in order to escape the kids. And we recently moved back to the suburbs and now call Western Springs, just west of the city proper, home. Some passion of mine that certainly would have come up during a live networking conversation is that I'm an avid Peloton rider, typically hopping on the bike every single day, and a huge football fan, both college and pro, with my Michigan State Spartans and the Chicago Bears. So let's get into it. When I was asked to talk about Google, there were so many different directions that I could have taken, but I wanted to focus on how our culture and philosophy could inspire each of you in your own business endeavors. And sharing more on Google's ethos around 10x thinking and taking insights to action seemed to be the best fit. To explain our culture, I'll first need a level set on who is Google. It's been just over 20 years since Larry and Sergey founded Google in a garage with the mission to organize the world's data and make it accessible to everyone. As of Q1 2021, we now have over 140,000 employees, 55 billion in quarterly revenue across 150 different offices in 60 different countries. A company built on its culture, data, and artificial intelligence. Let's take a look at what makes us tick. Our culture is open, curious, and data-driven, and backed by a relentless pursuit of 10x. Today, I will focus a bit more on these two pillars, 10x and data-driven insights, but let's start with 10x. Many companies strive to do 10% better year over year, but we believe that true innovation happens when you improve something 10x versus 10%. Our foundation is rooted in expansive, open thinking and curiosity, backed by data and deep respect for algorithms. And today, Alphabet is so much more than just Google. As you can see from the visual here, Google only makes up a small portion of the total Alphabet ecosystem. From investments in healthcare to tackling food waste with Google X, let's take a look at this 10x thinking in action. There are several very interesting sister companies to Google that display this 10x thinking. These investments are rooted in complicated problems that impact billions of people globally. From Sidewalk Labs, focused on solving big urban problems and creating a climate positive city, to Waymo, where we've developed a software stack for autonomous driving surpassing over 20 billion miles driven. For those of you in San Francisco, or maybe visiting soon, you can actually hail a Waymo robotaxi today. I'm inspired daily by the audacious goals that teams across Alphabet set out to accomplish each day. Some others to mention are Jacquard, putting chips in clothing to digitalize movement in an attempt to drive sports improvement, or Project Wing, a delivery drone that has been approved by the FFA, testing last mile delivery. We've been running testing in the US with Walgreens and FedEx, changing the way that consumers are receiving packages or even prescriptions. These are all 10x future-looking investments funded by Google's consumer-facing products. Alphabet certainly offers some great inspiration, but I work for Google. So let's talk about the best way to showcase some of that 10x thinking at Google, which is focused around artificial intelligence and machine learning. Google has been a leader for many years in solving consumer problems with machine-based learning, and it's applied across all of our products. But let's take a deeper look at a few examples. We'll start with Google Photos, one of my favorites. For those of you not familiar with Google Photos, it's a photo sharing and storing service. But the aha moment for me is that you'll never have to scroll through 1,000 pictures again. You can find what you need immediately. For example, if I'm looking for a specific photo from the beach, I can simply search for beach, and the query will bring up all the photos I have with beach or similar landmarks in the background. Or if I'm looking to post a photo of my wife for her upcoming birthday, Google Photos can use facial recognition, where I can select my wife's photo and see all of the photos I have with her within my queue. Next, we'll move on to Google Translate. Google Translate is a free tool that enables consumers to translate sentences, documents, or even full websites instantly. All of these translations come from computers, leveraging a process called statistical machine translations, which is really just a fancy way of saying that our computers base these translations on patterns in large amount of text. So instead of teaching our computers all the rules of every specific language, we let our computers learn for themselves by analyzing billions of documents and continue to grow over time. In the screenshot here, you'll also see that Google Translate continues to innovate, where here we can actually take a photo of a sign and understand it in different languages. Super compelling for anyone traveling abroad. Obviously, not easy to do in today's environment, but I look forward to hopefully visiting many other countries in the coming years. Next, we'll move on to Google Assistant. Google Assistant is focused on helping customers get things done. I personally use the Google Assistant across my home on a daily basis. For instance, when hands-free cooking, I can ask the Google Assistant what temperature I need to cook my chicken to, or how many ounces are in a cup. In my living room, I'm using it to turn on the Bears game, or pause the TV, or increase the volume. Google Assistant has certainly made things a lot more easier in my daily life. But a lot of things that we try to get done actually require a phone call, from scheduling an oil change, a haircut, or even a dinner reservation. I'm actually about to play an audio of a customer calling to make a reservation. But pay attention, as the customer here is actually not a customer at all. It's the Google Assistant AI calling on behalf of a user. Let's take a listen.
Good evening.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi. I'd like to reserve a table for Friday the 3rd.
Okay, hold on one moment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hold on one second. So Friday, November 3rd. How many people?
For 2 people.
2 people?
Yeah.
What time?
At 5 p.m.
Okay. And your name?
The first name is Daniel. That's Daniel.
Okay. You're all set.
Okay, great. Thanks.
We'll see you next Friday. Okay, thanks.
All of this would happen in the background, and the user would get a notification once the reservation has been booked. It's really compelling to hear how natural the language of the assistant sounds on the call, using ums and other language cues that makes it seem like a real human on the other side. There are many other examples of Google Assistant phone calls that you can check out on YouTube. And while I'm inspired on how this technology can help me in my personal life, I also like to wear a different hat and think about how this could potentially help my clients and partners. So let's flip this scenario around and think about the implication that Google Assistant could play for an understaffed pizza restaurant on a Friday night. The staff can be relieved from taking those phone call orders and answering phones all night and focusing that energy on other tasks, making pizzas, collecting payment, etc. This is really inspiring, particularly in today's staffing environment, where a lot of restaurant and other industries are not able to hire the talent needed in order to move their business forward. So now that we've talked through 10x thinking and how we're approaching this across both Google and Alphabet, I'd like to shift a bit into where we can leverage insights and data to drive our businesses forward. And to be honest, it starts with a lot of data. Google may have the most data out there, as Google has 8 products with over 1 billion users each. And consumers are always turning to Google to stay informed, be entertained, or find new ideas. And that gathers a ton of insights, not only across search, but also on YouTube. YouTube is a large portion of the Google ecosystem today, and it continues to grow over time as we see consumers shifting from traditional television to OTT CTV engagement. We've actually seen YouTube have significant growth on TV screens over the last year throughout the pandemic. And all of this really leads to a ton of compelling insights and data that I can share with brands that I partner with in order to help them alter their products, creative, and marketing strategies. So let's walk through some specific examples. I'll start with an example from Popeyes and Chick-fil-A, where we've leveraged Google Trends to understand how Popeyes and Chick-fil-A played with each other in each geo region. We can see here that prior to Popeyes chicken sandwich launch, Chick-fil-A actually dominated consumer interest across many regions across the United States. But if we look just a month ahead of time, or a month ahead in the future, we'll see that Popeyes' very buzzy chicken sandwich launch had the map looking very differently, showcasing how Google Trends can help brands understand what's happening not only for their business, but also for the competition. Popeyes had massive success with their chicken sandwich launch, which so much that they were able to win popularity across several new markets, and the demand, as you know, has since even further skyrocketed. Here's another view of the data on a geo region where we can understand over time where those spikes happened for Popeyes to surpass Chick-fil-A. So how could this data have been useful? Leveraging search insights could have been invaluable for helping Chick-fil-A respond to the rising chicken wars and understanding where Popeyes was gaining in popularity, potentially shifting their creative messaging within specific markets where they were losing share, or increasing budgets to ensure they had higher coverage. We also provided chicken war insights across the industry throughout the chicken wars as it heated up across pretty much all QSR brands, with even Taco Bell entering the ring. We've been able to leverage things like Google surveys, et cetera, to understand where consumers were finding interest in these products and how these brands could shift consumer perception to try their chicken LTOs. We've also offered a lot of insights to our partners throughout COVID, and I'm proud to have been able to support my partners with a ton of data to help them support their businesses during such a disruptive time frame. Many of our partners have had to close dining rooms and get creative on how they would approach marketing to consumers in such a rough time for so many individuals. The example you'll see here showcases a dashboard we created that tracks not only consumer mobility, but also the recovery mindset on a geographic region. It includes many factors like state restrictions, as well as the likelihood for people to go out, etc. On the top right means things are normal. Consumers have a high mobility and a strong recovery mindset in all of these geographic regions, where the bottom left means total lockdown, low mobility, restricted mindset. So how is this helpful to brands and partners? They can actually start to think about how they would want to speak to different consumers within these buckets so that they can have the most relevant message and influence to the best ability. The example I'll talk about here is Hershey, who leveraged this tool for their Halloween campaign in 2020, which focused their creative messaging around mobility and consumer recovery, showcasing a more homebound creative for consumers who were in the recovery mindset and showcasing a more lighthearted opportunity for those who had higher mobility and a higher recovery mindset. And it drove excellent results with 80% rise in e-commerce sales and higher Halloween sales than 2019, which is really impressive during a pandemic. They also boosted their seasonal market share by over 4 percentage points. Throughout COVID, we had focused on helping our partners plug into this consumer zeitgeist and provided insights that supported new relevant limited time offers like a larger piece chicken nugget meal for families or carryout and delivery innovation. Some example insights here are the rising customer insights in curbside pickup, which had 3,000% growth year over year, or contactless delivery, which was up 4,000% year over year. By sharing these insights with our partners, they were able to pivot their offerings and creative messaging to make the biggest impact. Some specific examples to speak to is Domino's Carside Delivery. Domino's was able to create a safe option for customers to pick up their food without having to go into the restaurant. Or Pizza Pedestal, an innovative tool that allowed Domino's to deliver pizzas contactless without just dropping the pizza on the floor or on your doorstep. Super innovative in a way to reach consumers and provide them with solutions during a crazy time frame within the pandemic. KFC also leaned into a lot of these insights, but more just on a creative level, making small tweaks and changes for family meals and ensuring they were using language like family feast in their creative. But brands have really been leading into these insights from Google long before COVID. And I'd love to show some more positive examples on brands who have leaned in prior to the pandemic. Let's start with an example from Kellogg's Rice Krispie Treat. Let's take a look.
Going back to school can be tough on kids, but it's an emotional roller coaster for parents too. Nervous parents want to show support, but aren't always sure how. Enter Kellogg's Rice Krispie Treats, Google Trends, and YouTube. Using Correlate, a tool within Google Trends, the Kellogg's team discovered a strong connection between school snacks and lunchbox notes. An idea and a new media strategy was born. Using customizable packaging, Kellogg's could help parents make an emotional show of support and ensure their kids get a great snack at school all at once. Leading up to back to school, Kellogg's turned to Director Mix, a new video builder from Google, to introduce the concept of the Right On wrapper. Director Mix enabled the creation of more than 110 custom 6-second ads, each designed as a specific response to a particular video on YouTube. The more personalized Director Mix ads were twice as effective as the non-personalized ads. The campaign continued throughout the back-to-school season with emotional 6-second, 15-second, and 30-second YouTube spots that drove best-in-class The more personalized direct or mix ads were twice as effective as the non-personalized ads. The campaign continued throughout the back-to-school season with emotional 6-second, 15-second, and 30-second YouTube spots that drove best-in-class. With emotional 6-second, 15-second, and 30-second YouTube spots that drove best-in-class.
Did they actually say McDonald's? Yes, they use their colors and fonts, etc.
Ads were twice as effective as the non-personalized ads. The campaign continued throughout the back-to-school season with emotional 6-second, 15-second, and 30-second YouTube spots that drove best-in-class.
Did they actually say McDonald's? Yes, they use their colors and fonts, etc.
The great content continues to flow, and I can't wait to hear what Dr. Ivan Meissner has in store for us in his keynote, Networking for Success. Dr. Ivan Meissner's presentation are always flush with practical skills and successful networking tips. Today, it is no different. Ivan will talk about the mindset of and practical skills that enable us to confidently and build that referral-based business. So before we get over to Dr. Ivan Meissner, let's hear from a member in India, Syed Zubair, about how BN impacted him. Over to him.
Hi everyone, this is Elizabeth from Bni India Mysore region, Samra chapter. I represent the category soaps and detergents, and I am the managing director of Neha Industries. We are the manufacturers of Udaya detergent cake and detergent powder. I am in BNA from the past 5 years, and my business has always been good, thanks to my BNA referral partners who follow the give us care policy. The nationwide lockdown, although justified, was very bad for most businesses in Mysuru. In fact, it was a life and death situation for our fellow countrymen and citizens of Mysuru. So, thinking about business, reference was not even on my list of priorities, but we have to keep going as well in the essential service industry. Yes, it was tough. However, the saying goes, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. I got support from BNI during those testing times. I had to get my business back on the fast track. I had to make sure that our employees continue to lay their bread on the table. My employees had to take care of their spouses, kids, and parents. We followed COVID appropriate behavior at our factory to keep them safe. My fellow chapter member Viresh connected me to Viva International, and I got a business of $100,000. This was just the beginning of a flood of business referrals all through the lockdown, which ensured that we keep running our business. Thanks to BNA, we could not only expand our business but also impact the lives of many people in our own humble way and pass on the favor BNA has done to us. We have food kits and philanthropic activities. So thank you, BNA, and a special thanks for Mr. Murali Srinivasan, Executive Director BNA Mysuru and District Director BNA India, who stood like a rock and ensured that we marched ahead against all odds and punched the pandemic in the face.
Thank you very much. This is one of my favorite presentations. I consider it my signature presentation on networking. It's called Networking for Success. Let me tell you a little story. A number of years ago, I was speaking at a very large event. There were almost 900 people at this event. And I was the keynote speaker. There was a lot of networking going on. And I was watching and observing. And when I had a chance to go up and speak, I asked two questions of the audience. First question was, how many of you are here today hoping to, maybe just possibly sell something? I'm telling you, 900 people raised their hands. I said, great. Second question, how many of you are here today hoping to, just possibly buy something? No one raised their hand. Not one single person. This is what I call the networking disconnect. The networking disconnect. People show up at networking events wanting to sell, but nobody's there to buy. And that's why so many people really dislike networking, because a lot of people use networking as a face-to-face cold calling opportunity. Hi, my name's Ivan. Let's do business. And they go right into direct selling. And I'm here to tell you, that's not the best way to network. I'm going to share with you how you can build a powerful personal network. In order to do that, you need to understand both the mindset and the skill set of networking. Now, a lot of people talk about the skill set. They'll give you techniques that you need to follow in order to network effectively, but not too many people talk about the mindset. And I'm going to spend a fair amount of time talking about the mindset for networking, because if you don't get the mindset right, all the techniques you use it doesn't matter. They won't work very effectively. So I want to talk about the mindset and the skill set, beginning with mindset and emotional quotient or emotional intelligence. You know, we don't teach this in colleges and universities anywhere in the world. We don't teach networking, social capital, emotional intelligence, none of that. And yet, it is so important for most businesses. If you look at the next slide, you'll see in a survey that I did as part of the gender book I published a number of years ago, over 91% of 12,000 people, we surveyed 12,000 people all over the world, 91% said that networking has played a role in their success. 91%. When have you ever seen 91% of any group of people agree to anything ever? I mean, that just doesn't happen. Yet in this survey of 12,000 people, 91% said networking's played a role in their success. Yet we don't teach this in colleges and universities anywhere in the world. And I think that's why it's being done wrong, because people are just going right into direct selling instead of understanding the proper mindset. And the proper mindset, I believe, begins with a concept that I call the butterfly effect of networking. The butterfly effect is part of chaos theory, a division of mathematics that says that the flapping of the wings of a butterfly change some minute thing in the environment, which changes something else, which changes something else, which changes something else, which changes the weather. That's the concept of the butterfly effect as it applies to chaos theory. One day, I was on this island, Necker Island in the Caribbean. And it was amazing. It was beautiful. It was back in about 2007. And the only place that you could actually get the internet was in this room, the great room of Necker Island. And so I was in the great room to actually write an article and send it to Entrepreneur, which I had to do every month and still do to this day, write an article for Entrepreneur. And I was behind. And I didn't know what to write. But I'm sitting in the great room, and you can just see from that, the view of the ocean is expansive, and everybody else was out at the pool or at the ocean. They're all having fun, and I had to write this article. And I was sitting there thinking, I have no idea what I'm going to write about. None. I mean, I'm blank. I mean, if you've ever done any kind of writing, you know, sometimes you just blank. You don't know what you're going to write about. And so I didn't know what I was going to write about. And while I'm sitting there thinking, up walks Sir Richard Branson. Richard Branson of Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Cruises, Virgin Telephone, Virgin Galactic, Virgin everything. And he walks by and he stops and he looks at me and he says, what are you doing? I said, I have a deadline today to get an article in. I got to write the doggone thing. And he said, oh, yeah, I understand deadlines completely. So look, when you're finished with the article, what I'd love for you to do is to come on down to the pool and see us down at the pool. And I'd love to, you know, chat with you a little bit. And we're there at the ocean and we're having fun. If I don't see you at the pool or at the ocean, sit next to me at dinner tonight and tell me more about this networking thing you do. It's really sounds very interesting. And he walked away. And I sat there and I thought, dang, how did I get here? How did I get here where a billionaire walks on up and says, hey, what are you doing? Come on out and play. Let's play at the pool or at the ocean. And if I don't see you, let's sit together in the lunchroom and let's talk. I thought, wow, this just blows my mind. How did I get here? And on that day in 2007, I did a piece that's now up on my blog called The Butterfly Effect of Networking. And what I decided to do was to reverse engineer how I got to Necker Island. And it started with one individual person, one person. And that one person, as you can see in the slide, introduced me to someone else, who introduced me to someone else, who introduced me to someone else, who introduced me to someone else. The person who I met 2.5 years before I was on Necker Island, 2.5 years earlier. By the way, it was a BNI member. She was a solopreneur business coach. And she reached out to me and asked me to help with the development of something. And I said, okay. And as a result of that, she introduced me to someone who introduced me to someone who introduced me to someone else and someone else. And I ended up getting invited to Necker Island for a special event where I had this chance to meet Richard Branson. This is the butterfly effect of networking, because the butterfly effect is like the flapping of the wings of that butterfly. It leads to one thing, which leads to something else, which leads to something else. And it's all about the relationships that you build along the way. In that 2.5-year period, I built relationships with all those individuals that you see that are circled. And all of these relationships led me to the next one and to the next one until finally I've now been to Necker Island 3 times, and I'm headed back there in about a week or so and spend another week with Richard. Here you see a photograph of him and I having a conversation. I believe this particular conversation was about health, of all things, as we're walking around on Necker Island. It's been an incredible experience, and it happened because of the butterfly effect of networking and me understanding that networking is more about farming than it is about hunting, that it's about cultivating relationships with people. And when you cultivate relationships with people, they will refer you to others. They'll connect you with others. You build these deeper and deeper relationships, and you end up having this impact of the butterfly effect. So in effect, this relationship continues even with Richard. I've been able to see some amazing things. In this next slide, you'll see a picture of Richard in the spaceship, in the White Knight 2 mothership, actually, for his spaceship. And by the way, this is not a photograph that was taken by a reporter. I was invited to the rollout of the mothership, and you see, maybe you might be able to see some heads across the bottom. That's because I'm holding up my camera, taking a picture. I was invited to see the rollout of the White Knight 2. Later, the next ship, the next slide, you'll see I was invited to the rollout of the Spaceship 2. The spaceship is the little ship there in the middle. That's the ship that will drop from the mothership and fly into outer space. And so my butterfly effect continues. It's like ripples, like the ripples in a pond. One thing leads to another thing, which leads to another thing, which leads to another thing. It really takes time. Networking is a marathon, not a sprint. It's about building long-term relationships. But you have to understand the butterfly effect is powerful. And that means that you can get connections from sometimes the most unlikely people. There was a BNI member who introduced me to someone who introduced me to someone else who introduced me to someone else, and a solopreneur, small business coach. And it's a powerful technique, but it takes a mindset of building relationships, not just going out there and cold calling or direct selling people. So the next topic I want to talk about is diversity. You know, networks are by nature clumpy. Okay, that's the technical term. They're cluster-like. You can see in this slide how there are connections. If you have a connection in your group, in your cluster, who's different than you, that's a connection to another cluster, which is a connection to another cluster. So we have a tendency as people to hang around with people that are much like ourselves. And what I have found is that a diverse network is an incredibly powerful network because it connects you to these other clusters of individuals. And so you then surround yourself with people who don't look like you, sound like you, they don't have the same educational background, they're not the same age, not necessarily the same gender. It's diverse, it's different. And the more diverse your network, believe it or not, the more powerful it is because it connects you with clusters of people that you wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity to connect with. So diversity is very, very important in terms of networking. And I've been talking about this for many decades. Diversity is critical to build a powerful personal network. It's also the right thing to do in life is to have diverse contacts, but it's also a good business decision. The last concept that I want to talk about with mindset is the idea of the VCP process and the time confidence curve that goes with that. Most of you have heard me talk about the VCP process. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but I think this is the reason you go to networking events. You don't go to networking events to sell. You go to networking events to work your way through the VCP process. VCP stands for visibility, credibility, profitability. And by the way, it's not a formula, it's a process. It's not V plus C equals P. It's you go from visibility to credibility, from credibility to profitability. Visibility is where people know who you are and what you do. Credibility is where people know who you are, they know what you do, and they know you're good at it. And that takes time. Getting to credibility takes time. Once you get to credibility, then you can get to profitability where people know who you are, what you do, they know you're good at it, and they're willing to refer you business on an ongoing reciprocal basis. VCP is the foundation of everything I teach. If you don't get VCP right, you're not going to network effectively because it's a mindset that involves the whole concept of networking being more about farming than it is about hunting. So let's talk about the impact that VCP has on something we call in BNI the time confidence curve. And in this slide, you see the basic time confidence curve that shows that it's going to take time. Whatever business you're in, it's going to take time before people have confidence in your ability to provide a quality product or service. Now, the next slide shows that there's actually a difference from profession to profession. That in some professions, like if you're a florist, the time confidence curve may be really quick to get referrals in that business. A printer's going to take a little bit longer. A real estate agent might take longer. And a financial planner investing someone's retirement money can take even longer. And so whenever you're networking, you have to recognize what business you're in and how that impacts the time confidence curve. So I've spent some time talking about mindset. I've talked about VCP, the butterfly effect of networking, the time confidence curve. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about skill set. And here I'm talking about in-person networking, face-to-face networking. And, there are definite techniques to use in terms of online networking, but I want to talk today mostly about some of the techniques that you can use in person when you're networking either in BNI or in other networking organizations. The first thing that you need to understand is that I've discovered over time that men and women actually network differently, and that's based on the gender book that I did where we surveyed 12,000 people. I want you to look at this slide about different paths. One is a straight path, the other kind of is a winding path. One approach to networking is transactional, another approach to networking is relational. We found, well, before I tell you what we found, take a look at those two slides. Which one of those slides would you guess would tend to be men, and which one would you guess would tend to be women? Well, what we discovered in our survey of 12,000 people was that men tended to be more transactional in the way they networked, and women tended to be more relational, which means there was a little bit more of a winding curve in terms of connecting with other people in a networking environment. Now, if that doesn't sound true to you, if that doesn't ring true to you, tell me what you think of this. Mission: go to the Gap and buy a pair of jeans. Man did it in 16 minutes. It cost $39. The woman who did it passed the Gap, which I think was fun. It took her 2 hours and 16 minutes, and she purchased jeans, shoes, handbag, perfume, and makeup. Now, sometimes I talk to people about this topic, and man or a woman might say, well, I'm not like that. Okay, well, this isn't about you. This is about the survey of 12,000 people we did, and we found that women tended to be more relational. They meandered through their networking way more than men tended to do. So, which is better? Well, that's the key, isn't it? So let's look at some of the data on that from the survey we did. On average, men and women spent about 6.5 hours a week, 6.31 hours a week networking. Men spent 6.44 hours, women spent 6.19 hours a week networking. So men spent a little more time than women. The average percentage of business generated overall was 46.7%. Men generated 43.96% and women generated 49.44%. Let's review. Men spent, based on this survey of 12,000 people, more time networking and generated less business than women did. When we looked at that, we thought this is really interesting. The women have done better than the men at networking in terms of the percentage of business that they generated. What if we just looked at relational versus transactional? And so I merged the data of gender, men and women, and we just looked at relational versus transactional, and it was the same thing. Those people, men and women, who were relational in the way they networked, generated a lot more business than those who were just transactional. And so that approach of being relational, meandering around a little bit, is really, really important. It's really effective. Now, I know some guys are out there going, what's that look like? So here's an example of what that looks like. I was at a networking event, had a man on one side, a woman on the other side. And we're all three talking. It was an open group of us talking. And a second woman walks up. And the woman to my right looks to the new person, the new woman who walked in, and said, "Hi, what a pleasure to meet you. How did you hear about tonight's event?" Not what do you do, but how did you hear about tonight's event? And the woman who stepped up said, "Oh, my friend Karen invited us." And the first woman says, "You know Karen?" "I know Karen as well. How do you know Karen?" And they start talking about Karen. And I look over at the guy on my left, and he's rolling his eyes. He's like, "Really? Really? Who cares about Karen? Nobody cares about Karen. We want to do business." But I'm watching this take place, and I'm like, wow, that is a perfect example of how you network in a relational way versus a transactional way. And we discovered that if you network in a relational way, you are going to generate more business. It's about building those connections and relationships with other people. If your network is a mile wide but only an inch deep, it will never be a powerful network. It needs to be both wide and in some places very deep. Another thing we found, in the next slide, you'll see there's a direct and dramatic linear correlation between the amount of time spent networking and the amount of business generated from your efforts. So it's not just about being relational, but it is about spending a fair amount of time in the process. Now, the average was 6.5 hours, but who wants to be average? We found that people who spent more than 6.5 hours, 8 or more hours a week, generated substantially more business through their networking efforts than those who didn't spend that amount of time. So I think a good amount of time each week to spend in your networking efforts is around 8 hours a week. It could be one-to-ones, it could be doing thank you cards, it could be going to networking events. Obviously, these are all different networking activities. But there's a direct correlation between the amount of time spent and the amount of business that is generated. All right, so when you are at a networking event, let's assume it's not an online event, but an in-person event, you walk into a networking event and you look around and you think, like the slide shows here, where do I start? I don't even know where to start. Well, a lot of people feel this way. Honestly, I feel this way sometimes when I walk into a room. So here's a couple of suggestions. In the room, you're going to see, like in this slide, closed twos and closed threes. You're going to see people who are standing face to face to one another. Very hard to break into that conversation. Or you're going to see people that are standing from the view from the ceiling, like a triangle, a tight group. It's very hard to strike up a conversation with people that are standing like that. Or people might be standing like in a huddle where they're all standing around in a circle, and it's very hard to break into that. So when you walk into any networking event, what you want to look for are these: open twos and open threes. You want to see people who are standing slightly askew so that you could just walk on up and introduce yourself. Or the open threes is more like a U shape. An open four would be larger, and five, an open group, many people, but always leaving an open spot. Look, this is a subtle but significant technique in not only knowing where to go to network when you go into a room, but if you are running a network, if you are on the leadership team of a BNI chapter, you want to make sure your members are always standing in those in-person meetings, always standing in open twos and open threes, because it's very inclusive. It makes people feel more welcome. They can step in and have a conversation. I remember once at an event that I did, I just spoke about open twos and open threes, and I then was talking to someone afterwards, and he and I were standing, and unfortunately we were standing perpendicular, and he looked at me and he said, Ivan, we're in a closed two. And I said, oh, you're right. And we opened it up, and within moments a third person comes in. He and I look at each other and we go, closed three, and we open it up. And then someone else came in. It was a 4, a 5, a 6. We kept opening and opening and opening. Finally, there were about 8 or 9 people in this circle, all talking and connecting with one another before I went to meet some other people. But that's the way it works. When you have an open 2 or an open 3, it becomes an open 4, an open 5, an open 6. And so it's a subtle technique, but it's a very effective technique. Let's go back to the very first slide. Where do I start? Now, if you look at that first slide, you'll see in the bottom left, there's an open 2. In the top right, there's an open 3. Of course, there's individuals. You can walk up and talk to individuals. Here's something that is really counterintuitive. It's hard to fathom, but it's true. For those of you who are introverts, it's actually easier to kind of slip into a larger group. If you can find an open 4 or 5 or 6, it's easy to slip in kind of unnoticed and then just slide into the conversation, easier than walking into an open 2 or even an open 3. So always look for open 2s and 3s. And if you're running a BNI chapter, always, always, always make sure that your meetings, your in-person meetings, have your members standing in open stances. Next thing I want to talk about is the 24/7/30 follow-up system. 24/30/7 follow-up system. This is in a number of my books, and it's a great technique. So you go to networking events. So many people say to me, how do I follow up? What do I do to follow up? So here's my suggestion. Within 24 hours, what you want to do is send them a thank you note. An email is okay. A thank you card, something, through the mail, that's even better. That's a great way to, just recognize somebody that you met at a recent meeting. And it's very important that when you send them the note, whether it be an email or a card, that you don't sell to them. Don't sell to them. This is about making a connection. This is about working your way through the VCP process. So within 24 hours, reach out to them and say something simple like, hey, it was very nice meeting you at yesterday's BNI meeting or the Chamber of Commerce meeting or whatever meeting you met that person. It was very nice meeting you there. I hope our paths cross again. That's it. It can be that simple. Then within 7 days, you want to connect on their social media, where they like to hang out. And they might like to hang out in a different place than you like to hang out. And I learned this from my kids. My kids taught me that I need to go where they are, not where I want to be. I figured this out when my eldest, she's now 35, but when she was 17, I'd call her up. No answer. But if I texted her, boom, she'd respond right now. I was like, really, honey? You know this thing you have is a telephone. You can actually talk in it, right? And she's like, yeah, Dad, right, I know. But she would respond to the text, not the phone call. My next child, Dorian. Well, if I called Dorian, no response. If I texted Dorian, no response. This is when Dorian was 17. Dorian's now 30. And I asked my late wife, I asked Elizabeth, hey, what do I do with Dorian? When I text Dorian, they don't respond. What do I do? And Elizabeth said, oh, you've got a WhatsApp, Dorian. Now, this was, 13, 14 years ago. I said, what's WhatsApp? And she told me what WhatsApp was. And so I tested it. Called Dorian, nothing. Texted, nothing. I then WhatsApped her. I downloaded WhatsApp. I had one contact. It was Dorian. I WhatsApped Dorian, and I got a response immediately. Okay, got this. Then came my son, Trey. Well, Trey was a gamer. He loved to play games. And I discovered if I called him nothing, texted him nothing, he didn't like WhatsApp. But because he was a gamer, there was an instant messaging feature on Steam, an online platform where you can buy different games. And so, you know what? I was in my 50s. I'm like, I'm going to buy a game so that I can instant message my son. I bought a game, downloaded it, connected with him on the instant messaging feature, and I tested it, called him nothing, texted him nothing. But if I instant messaged him through Steam, he would respond immediately and say, "Hey, Dad, what do you want?" It was amazing. What I learned was, it doesn't matter where I like to hang out or I like to communicate. What matters is the way they like to communicate and where they hang out. It applies here. So find out what social media platform they like most. Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is, Pinterest, whatever it is, that's where you want to go. And then you may say, yeah, but I don't do that. Well, then you don't network completely. You're not selling or networking effectively, because you need to be where your clients are. You need to be where the people who are going to refer you are, so you can build that relationship. So I would urge you to find out when you're talking to them, when you meet them, ask them, what social media platform do you use the most? And then within 7 days, connect with them on that social media platform. Respond to something they post. Say, hey, I really love this post. I'm going to share it. Or just something where they know that you're looking at the stuff that they are posting. And don't sell to them. Don't sell to them. The third technique is within 30 days. Within 30 days, you want to reach out to those people that you have sent a note to and said, hey, it was great meeting you. You've connected with them on social media. Now it's time to reach out and set a one-to-one with them. And so what you want to do is through social media or through email or, again, a card, say, hey, we met a month ago at such and such event. I've been following the stuff that you post on social media. I love it. I'd love to get together with you and learn more about what you do, and maybe you'd be willing to learn a little bit about what I do. You do a normal one-to-one with them. Then sit down and do the one-to-one. But again, don't sell to them. I call it like a sales seizure. People they can't help themselves. They have to sell. Hold back. It's about building the relationship. It's all about building the relationship. You know the old expression, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, I don't think it's either. I don't think it's what you know or who you know. It's how well you know them that really counts. It's about going deep and building a relationship with these people. And step 3 is really the beginning of that good relationship building process. 24/7/30 follow-up system. So, in case any of you want to know, I'm on most of the social media platforms. I do probably spend more personal time on Facebook platform than the others, but you can always find me on Facebook, facebook.com, ivanmeisner.bni founder. And of course, those of you who are visiting at this convention, bni.com, got to go to bni.com. All right. The last thing I want to talk about today is that I've reviewed a lot of different things. It's now time to practice those things. You got to practice, practice, practice. You know, I talked about the mindset topics. I've talked about skill set. I talked about open twos, open threes, the 24/7/30 follow-up system. These are techniques to use to help make you more effective at networking. Talked about the importance of diversity and how that helps you network more effectively. Now you got to go out and practice these things. Practice is key in building a powerful personal network. And look, don't worry about whether you're going to make a mistake or not. You will. It's inevitable. But you got to go out there and work these things through in order to become really good at networking. In order to be a master connector, you have to practice these techniques. So let me tell you a story. Years ago, I was invited to do a live television presentation, a television interview at the release of one of my very first books, World's Best Known Marketing Secret. And my publicist called me up and said, I've got this great opportunity for you to do a live TV show in Connecticut. It has a huge viewership. And I said, well, yeah, of course, I'm definitely interested. And she said, well, now hang on. It's live. I said, yeah, okay, I get it. It's live. She said, no, I mean, it's live. So whatever you say or whatever you do is going to be out live on television. Are you still comfortable doing this? And I'm like, well, I was. She said, all right, you just need to know that it's going to be live. And I'm like, okay, fine, that's fine. I can do it. She said, okay. And one other thing, you got to do something visual. I said, visual? What do you mean visual? She said, I don't know, come up with something visual. Like, I talk about networking. What do I do? Run up and down the aisle, shake people's hands? She said, I don't know, whatever it is, just make it visual. And so I went out, I got this stupid toolbox, and I put in business cards and badges and a card file. And I was going to have the tools to network, and that was visual, but that just didn't work for me. You know, I didn't particularly like that very much. It wasn't too exciting. I wanted something exciting. So, as you may know, I'm an amateur magician. I was a member of the Magic Castle for a number of years, but the operative word really truly is amateur. And I discovered that there are some great tricks that sometimes you can do from stage. And so I asked the director, I said, hey, what do you think if I do a magic trick on stage on the show? And he's like, well, what do you have in mind? I said, well, when we get to the end of the interview, I'll tell the host who's doing the interview, oh, careful. And he or she'll say, why is that? And then I'll open the book and I'll say, because that's hot. And he said, yeah, that's fantastic. You got to do that. So I'm, okay, I'll throw in a little magic trick here at the end of my interview, make it very, very visual. So the day of the interview came, and I show up, and it was a really big show, large green room, lots of different guests. I was on towards the end of the show, and we're watching the show live in the green room. And while we're watching the show live, we see someone walk by us who's dressed as an American cowboy, and someone dressed as a construction worker, and then someone as a police officer. And we look at these, and someone in the audience says, wow, that looks like the Village People. And we're like, no, that's not going to be the Village People. I mean, come on, really? The Village People on the show? And we're watching the show live, and they were about to go to commercial, and the announcer gets on and he says, and next, ladies and gentlemen, on the Fairfield County Exchange, the Village People. And Dr. Ivan Meisner to talk about networking. And I think, oh my goodness, I go on after the Village People? Are you kidding me? This is going to be embarrassing. I mean, these guys are visual. I'm going on after them. So on that magic trick, you have what's called flash paper. It looks like cotton. And the more flash paper you put in, the bigger the flame. So I thought, well, gosh, I got to make this really good. I think I'm going to put just a little bit more in the little device to do the trick. And then the Village People come on, and I watch as they do their whole segment. And, you know, they have the entire audience on their feet. They're all dancing. They're all singing. They're all, you know, just having a great time. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, I go on next. This has got to be really good. I'm going to put just a little bit more of that flash paper in. And, of course, what's the last song the Village People would do? YMCA. So again, they pan to the audience. The entire audience is on their feet. They're all singing YMCA, and they're doing the dance. And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be so embarrassing. I go on after this. I'm going to put just a little bit more of that flash paper in. And so while they're finishing up the song, the producer comes in and says, Meisner, who's Meisner? I'm like, that's me. Said, okay, you're up next. The village people are running a little bit late. We need to get you in there really quick, put a microphone on you. I'm not going to have a chance to talk to the host and hostess very much. They're a man and a woman. You're going to be working mostly with the woman. We got to get you in there and mic you up right away. Are you ready? I'm like, yeah, just a second. A little bit more in there. So we walk on out. I sit down. There's a man and a woman, and it's the woman who's going to be doing most of the interview. And so I said to her, I didn't want to surprise her. So I said to her, hey, when you get to the end of the interview, would you mind just holding up a copy of my book? And when you hold up a copy of my book, I'm going to, and just as I got to the point where I was going to tell her what I was going to do, the director walks up and says, no. I don't want her holding up a copy of your book. It's too much of the book. We're going to have a JPEG of it up on screen. I don't want you to do that. No. And walked away. And, the blood drained from my face because that was my big ending. And she could tell that I was really upset that I couldn't do that. And she said, oh, well, I'm the host. What do you want to do? I said, oh, thank you so much. So when we get to the end of the interview, would you just hold up a copy of my book? Now the microphone has been put on me, and the director is listening to me conspire with the host about doing this. And I get right to the same point where I say to the host, and when we get to the end of the interview and you hold up a copy of the book, I'm going to, and the director runs on over and says, hey, you two, I said no to the book. And you're on live in 4, 3, 2. And the host looks at me and says, it's okay. I'll just go with it. No problem. So I do this whole interview. I have a little toolbox. It's kind of lame. Didn't go over very well. But we get to the end of the interview. And she, being the consummate professional that she is, she held up a copy of the book and said, I have here a copy of Dr. Meisner's book. And I said, oh, careful. And she said, why is that? And I said, because that's hot. And of course, I did the same trick, but I maybe put a little too much flash paper in because it went whoosh. And she went, and jumped into the lap of her co-host. She is lying in the lap of her co-host, screaming, I'm stomping the fire out on the book. I look around. I didn't think this through well because this was old school 25 years ago. These cameras, big cameras, and the flash, a big flash, all the cameramen got blinded. And all 3 cameramen are walking around, rubbing their eyes. Nobody can see. The director's in the back like this. She's lying in the lap of the co-host. She's screaming. Finally, the only thing she can say as she clasps her chest is, oh, thank goodness I didn't swear on live television. We're still on live television. She says, thank goodness I didn't swear on live television. And her co-host, the man who she's lying in the lap of, has said nothing throughout the interview until this moment where he looks off camera, off stage, and he says, wardrobe, new trousers for her, please. I look over at the director, and the director is, cut, go to commercial. Cut, go to commercial. My B&I director was off stage. He looked at me and he went, that was visual, but we should probably leave town now. In most states throughout the US, I'm considered an expert on networking. In Connecticut, I think I'm considered an arsonist. So here's why I tell you that story. We all make mistakes. Hopefully none of yours were on live television. Thank goodness YouTube didn't exist back then. Thank goodness it didn't. So, we all make mistakes. It happens. The truth is, our mistakes are our tuition to pay our success. You really want to be successful at networking? You really want to be a master connector? You want to build a powerful personal network? Practice. Practice. You're going to make mistakes. It's okay. Trust me, I've made them. I've made a lot of them. And one of them, at least, was on live television. Let me wrap up my presentation for today. Different people, different places, different races, different religions, different countries, different cultures. We all speak the language of referrals. We all want to do business with people we know and trust. It's such a powerful concept. And it works so well. Certainly, BNI works so well in dozens and dozens of countries all around the world. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said that what lies before us and what lies behind us is nothing compared to what lies within us. What I love about BNI is that it takes the best that lies within us. It takes this philosophy of giver's gain, this idea that if I help you, you'll help me, and we'll all do better as a result of it. I think that giver's gain is not only a great way to get business, it's an even better way to do business. I thank you all very much. I hope you really enjoy the convention. This is Ivan Meisner, founder of BNI. Thanks for watching.
In your chapter or in BNI. Now, this morning during the roundtable, I happened to meet members from Japan, from Philippines, from Vietnam and Australia, and some in Singapore. 3 weeks old. I happened to meet members from Japan, from Philippines, from Vietnam and Australia, and some in Singapore. And they were only, some of them are only 3 weeks old. Amazing. For you, 3 weeks old or a month old to be participating in Global Convention, I'd like to acknowledge you for taking that step to be here with us today. And for those of you who are only like 3 months old, type in the chat, how many months are you in BNI, so we get to cheer you on together with us. And I share with them, BNI is like what Dr. Ivan Meisner said, it's a marathon and not a sprint. Not your first 12 months, ladies and gentlemen. It is your next 12 months that matters. Stay with the winners. And I do see Kun Kolakit online. Sawadee to you. Right, speaking of referrals, have you been at Global Convention Expo yet? So check out the members' businesses. So if you have a menu to do some, some networking over there, and check out the expo, because one lucky master connector who is going to make the most with our exhibitors will be going home with a brand new iPad courtesy of Paperit, and you can check them out in Expo too.
Well, hello BNI, and welcome to today's session of Next Level One-to-Ones, which is what I'm going to be talking to you about today. Now, this is a topic that's really close to my heart for lots of reasons, but mostly because I find that, rightly or wrongly, many members over time seem to lose their way when it comes to their one-to-ones, and instead of them building and getting the most out of them, they tend to just get a bit lazy with them, to be honest. So we're going to talk today about next level one-to-ones. Now, these are the kinds of one-to-ones that allow you to make the most out of your BNI membership, to make the most out of the time that you're spending with the people that you are wanting to network with. one-to-ones. Now, these are the kinds of one-to-ones that allow you to make the most out of your BNI membership, to make the most out of the time that you're spending with the people that you are wanting to network with. And that way, everybody gets a good return on their time and their dollar investment. To make the most out of the time that you're spending
Hi there, and thanks for being here. My name is Calvin Strawn, and for the next few minutes, I'll be your speaker and coach as we go through how to help you find a way to win and discover how to perform your best under pressure. My intention in these next few minutes is to help you become a master connector, to be that person everyone seems to know. And as you move into that space, becoming a master connector, invariably, it's going to have you moving outside of your comfort zone. And as you do that, that's when the pressure starts to show up. And that's what I'm here to support you to do. So what gives me the ability to support you in a place like that? Well, I've been speaking now for about 14 years. And I've had the fortunate ability to speak in front of many Fortune 500 companies, from the consumer packaged goods industry to tech, to finance, to pharmaceutical sales. I work with a number of organizations around the globe as a speaker and a coach. And I've covered things from sales and leadership and time management and presentation skills and communication and basic motivation sometimes, just to help companies be their best when it matters most. Also, I work with people one-on-one. So for example, I work with the CFO or the executive vice president or the entrepreneur or the small business owner. I work with lawyers and doctors and dentists, and I've worked with students and divorcees and artists like Hollywood actors and musicians over the course of that time. So I'm not showing up here to sort of show off or brag or talk about myself. What I'm trying to do here is show you that I've survived these 14 years, and I'm going to bring the best of what I've learned by going through all those moments. So my name is Calvin Strawn, and this is my masterclass. Great. So let's take a quick second just to go over the agenda and what we'll be covering in these next few minutes together. So the first thing is, some of you saw me in the Booster series this summer as I talked about pressure, specifically the pressure loop, what's happening internally to you as you move outside of your comfort zone. So do a quick review what's happening to you physiologically when you're actually moving out of your comfort zone. So review the pressure loop. Once we've got the pressure loop understood, then we'll look at, hey, 3 techniques that'll help you be your best when it matters most. So we'll look at how to connect to your worth. It's so important for you to connect to your worth before going in to reach out to somebody you may not know, do a presentation, close a business. Really understand what your worth and what your value is before going into that moment. The second technique we'll look at is getting present with a keyword, really honing in what's happening to you internally so you can shift it in a moment. And then finally, we'll cover how to access your hero, giving you the blueprint of what you can do in the moment to be your absolute best when the pressure's on. That's our agenda. Let's get to it. Okay, great. So let's look at the pressure loop. Before we do, let's set some context. I talk about how to be your best under pressure. And when people hear that topic, a lot of times they say, well, I thrive under pressure. I'm better under pressure. And part of me kind of laughs a little bit because that's just not necessarily true. Being better under pressure has nothing to do with your experience, has nothing to do with your motivation or drive or intelligence. It's something that we're all vulnerable to. And we're seeing that proof in a very high-profile fashion this past year. We saw the Euro Cup, where the British team, all of a sudden in the finals, had some challenges there. We also seen it at the Olympics with Simone Biles and the gymnastics team. And we're seeing it with tennis and Wimbledon and so many high-profile moments where people are just succumbing to the effects of pressure. And there are lots of musicians and athletes who reported the same things, that when the pressure strikes, their abilities reduce. And so it makes you think, so what's going on? What's happening there? What's causing that to happen? People who are this talented are vulnerable to it. Why? What's going on? And it makes me think about a class I took in university, a class called evolutionary biology. And in that class, what we looked at is, what's the evolutionary advantage of a species to help them survive? And so, for example, if you look at, say, a lion, right? A lion has got these claws and these fangs, right? Makes a very powerful hunter out in the wild. Or you think of a shark, like a great white shark. They've got this incredible nose and olfactory system where they can smell a single drop of blood and literally thousands and gallons and from miles away in the ocean. It's incredible. So you say, okay, well, a lion's got claws and fangs. A shark can swim and got this incredible nose. What do we have? What we have is our mind. Our mind has hooked us up for survival. And some folks would call that a blessing and a curse, okay? Because the curse would be our mind is kind of like a don't get killed device, which helps us survive technically, right? Don't get killed. So you're out looking in the wild, you're watching for dangers and problems and predators and what could hurt you or harm you, and it fires off a whole cascade of things inside your body. So how does that tie to pressure? Well, pressure is a perceived threat or a danger to your system. As you go outside your comfort zone, your don't get killed device gets triggered and this whole cascade fires off instantaneously. So what happens is you're going outside your comfort zone and wham, you're mentally hijacked. Your processing and thinking brain gets cut off and you go into an entirely reactive moment. Specifically, adrenaline gets fired off. And so now all of a sudden, you've got more adrenaline through your body, and now you have a physiological response. Physically, your knees feel funny, your stomach feels sick, your heart starts to race, your eyes get big, your hands are shaky, you're babbling. There's physical reactions going on. Simultaneously, you have a mental response where your mind starts having a whole dialogue and putting pictures and thoughts in your minds. Thoughts like, I can't do this, this is too hard, this is scary, I want to quit. And you're seeing yourself fail in the past. Didn't work there, didn't work here, and you're having this whole mental response. Now that mental response triggers what? A perceived threat. So your don't get killed device goes, holy crow, and gives you even more adrenaline. So now you have an even more physiological response. Your hands are shaking, your heart's beating, you can't talk, you can't think, and you're caught in what's called the pressure loop. Why is it important to think about this? Because remember before I said it cuts off your thinking brain? That's so important when you're in pressure moments, because in your thinking brain houses your working memory capacity. Your working memory capacity holds your ability to think of something at one time while think of something else. So what do you see? What do you mean, Cal? So let's say you go into a meeting, okay, and you have to know the client, the company, you got to know the company history, the questions you have, how your service or product can help this person. And you go into that meeting and all of a sudden somebody walks out of the room, or they give you a tough question, or they give you a nasty facial expression. All of a sudden, bang, it triggers your don't get killed device. We're in danger. And then what happens? The pressure loop kicks in and it cuts off your thinking. It cuts off your working memory capacity. And so now you're having a hard time to think of, what was her name again? Oh, what did I want to say? And you start drawing blanks. And that perceived threat leads to more of the pressure loop. You see what's happening here? So it doesn't matter if you're Simone Biles or a professional football team, or if you're a tennis player or a musician or someone running a business. When that pressure loop kicks in, all of a sudden you lose your best abilities. So our goal here is, how can we manage that process? How can we discover to be our best when it really matters most? That's the point of this talk. That's what we're going into next with these next 3 techniques. What's interesting to me is that in the business world, so many people associate their self-esteem or their worth to their accomplishments, meaning they don't feel worthy of something unless they've accomplished. How big is your business? How many employees do you have? Do you run your own company? How much money do you make? And we associate our worth or our value to the level of our accomplishments. This is very dangerous because this is called the self-esteem equation. And so what happens now is, all of a sudden in that context or in that frame, if you can't accomplish something, or it seems like you may not be able to accomplish something, all of a sudden it puts our value and our worth in jeopardy. And in our context of pressure, what happens is it triggers your don't get killed device. If all of a sudden it feels like you're not going to accomplish, that's a perceived threat. And your don't get killed device goes, holy crow. And all of a sudden now you've got this pressure loop firing off. So what I want to get is this: your worth is not something you earn. Your worth is something you already are. And if you can get in the habit of not linking your worth to your accomplishments, it becomes a buffer against the pressure. And so before you go into that next meeting or make that next phone call or that next reach out or go outside your comfort zone, take time to recognize what's great about you, little things and big things. What do you value about you? What are you grateful for? Meaning you can walk, you can talk, you're a part of this organization, you're watching this video now, you can see me, you can hear me, you've got friends, family, you've gone to school, all of these things. What do you truly value about you? Little things and big things. As you start to realize that your worth is not something you earn, it's something you are, it becomes that buffer against the pressure. Because you're not tying your esteem to your accomplishments, you're tying it to the things you already are. And there are added benefits here. If you get in the habit of recognizing what you value about yourself, the research shows it triggers certain parts of the brain, specifically certain parts of your ego. And it gives you that ego strength. So when you do face those uncomfortable, difficult, perceived threat moments, you make less mistakes because you're bolstering yourself up against what you already value. And if you do make a mistake through doing this, guess what? You bounce back faster. And you're not caught up in the overwhelm. So I want you to get in the habit of even just right now listening to me, take a minute and say, hey, what do you value about you? What's great about you? What do you really appreciate and are just extremely blessed to have in your life? And get in the habit of really focusing on those things on a regular basis. It'll actually give you the buffer you need to face the pressure going forward. Let's go to our second technique. So in a previous life, I used to work in the medical field. I was a medical device sales rep specifically, meaning I would go into a hospital and I would sell a hip or a knee replacement to that hospital. Once I made the sale, my job was to then go into the surgery with the surgeon and lead them or facilitate the surgery. And so my job was to know how much to cut, where to put the implant, what x-ray should look like, that kind of information. And there were times where maybe it was a new procedure or a new technique or a new instrument, and all of a sudden we're in the surgery, and the surgeon would turn to me and say, hey, what do we do now? And a few times, I'm embarrassed even more than a few times, I'm embarrassed to even say I didn't know the answer. I came into that room, I reviewed my materials, I had things memorized, I felt stone cold coming in. But then when I got into the room, under the pressure of the nurses and the anesthetists and the x-ray tech and the surgeon saying, what do we do? All of a sudden now, my don't get killed device fires off. I don't know the answer. And now I'm going through the pressure loop where I'm feeling my knees getting weak, my stomach feeling sick, my eyes, my heart rate, my working memory capacities is evaporated. I can't think of anything. Where's my car? Where's my lunch? Where do I live? Like I'm just drawing blanks like crazy. What do we do, Calvin? Come on, what do we do? So you're in that moment under that intense pressure. How do you pull it out? How do you turn it around? Well, the key thing here is to get present with a key word. Remember, in the pressure loop, your mental or thinking side of your mind has been hijacked. So our goal here is to stop the hijacking. So that all that intensity, we just need some time to stop the pressure loop and get back to what we already know. So how do we do it? So in that moment, I'm saying get present with a key word. Get present. My first thing is, can you feel your heart rate? So for me specifically, if I notice my heart rate going too fast, automatically my key word is slow down. That's the first thing I say, slow down. Now I don't go out loud, slow down to the whole room. I don't do that. It's actually just internally to myself, slow down. It's a singular action phrase you can focus on that takes away from the don't get killed device. So maybe for you, it might be breathe, or listen, or connect, okay? Or it's okay, just simply a simple singular phrase you can focus on to take away from that perceived threat. And as I notice my heartbeat, I then focus on, can I feel my feet on the ground? Okay, can I feel my clothes on my back? I try to get back into my body. A lot of times in the pressure loop, you can't feel or think or do anything. You're just completely overwhelmed. So the goal of this technique is to get back to you, slow down, take away from the hijacking, and get back to your working memory capacity. Now, it may feel like an eternity when you say, slow down, right? 1 second feels like an hour in those kind of moments. But all we're looking for here is just a few milliseconds. Slow down. Breathe, right? Just that pause, that simple slowdown will give you enough to take away from the don't get killed device, get yourself back online, and you will find a way in that pressure moment. Make sense? Let's move on to the next one. So in the final few moments here, I want to talk about accessing your hero. Finding that hero within you that can help you be your best when it matters most. So far, I've covered that when it comes to pressure, there's a reduction in your ability and that no one gets a pass. And there's a good reason for that, because we have this evolutionary process, this biological hardwiring that when we have that perceived threat, it has a reduction in our ability. So what if there was an exception to the rule, though? What if there were some folks who actually could get better under pressure? And through my research, I did find a group of folks who were actually quite strong under pressure, and they are a bunch of bomb technicians. There was a study done in the early 80s with some bomb technicians, the folks who would actually stop a bomb from blowing up, right? And some of these folks were really good, like really good under pressure. So coming into the study, of course, they were all good, otherwise you blow up. But amongst the good, there were some people who were excellent, meaning they got all the awards and promotions and distinctions, and they got the higher pay because they were excellent when the challenges were at the highest. And so some researchers said, hey, listen, what separates the excellent from the good? Like, what's going on there? And they put them into a situation that was fully very pressurized. And they actually had them followed and studied in that challenging moment. And what they found was when the pressure was the highest, that excellent group, what they found was their heart rate dropped under pressure, which is the exact opposite of the don't get killed device in the pressure loop. So these excellent bomb technicians, heart rate came down. They were super calm and cool and collected in this extremely intense, challenging moment. And so what the researchers found was they said those individuals went into a very cold, meditative state. And the piece I really want to point out here is state. As part of my coaching and speaking, I got training in neuro-linguistic programming. And a lot of what we do is we look at state. And now state is a combination of how you think and how you feel. How you think and how you feel in any given moment will determine how you actually act or show up in the world. And so these individuals went into a meditative state, a meditative way of thinking and feeling. And so how do we modify our state? We modify our state by 3 actions. 1, how are we holding our body? How are our shoulders back or slouched? Is our head up or down? Our facial expressions, are we happy? Are we grimacing? Like, all of these things can affect how we think and how we feel. Another element is the thoughts in your mind. The thoughts in the mind, the self-talk, the internal chatter, these things affect how you think and how you feel as well. And finally, the actual words you would use to describe that particular incident or moment affect how you think and how you feel. So for example, if you're bored has a whole pattern. It has a body posture, how you're sitting or slouching, has a facial expression, has a gesture, it has a thought. I'm bored, I'm tired, when can I fall asleep, right? And a language. Okay, how much longer? Okay, are we done yet? Like, that language is part of being bored. If you're excited, that also has a physical pattern. Shoulders might be back this time. Your head's up. You're gesturing with more certainty. Your facial expression might change. Okay, and the thoughts in your mind, the images you think about, the memories you focus on, the success, the stories you tell yourself would shift when you're excited. As with the language, I can do this, I'm ready, I'm looking forward to it. Oh my gosh, I don't want it to be over. As you're saying these things, it shifts how you think and how you feel. So your state can be impacted, and it can impact how you perform under pressure. And you can shift that state in an instant. One of the great things I love is the field of acting. I used to be an actor myself. And with really great actors, they can jump from one human state to another state in an instant, especially when they're really talented. And those that are really talented are so good that you believe they're actually there when you're watching them. If you think of, like, say, Meryl Streep, When she steps into that state, all of a sudden you're watching her and you absolutely believe that she's that thing. Meanwhile, she may have never done it before. Okay? So what's great about this is my acting coach used to tell me, you want to make the imaginary circumstances real. So perhaps under pressure, you don't perform well. You do choke, you do babble, you do get nervous, you start to lose train of thought. But you can now say to yourself, I can be outstanding under pressure, because you're going to make the imaginary circumstances real by shifting your state, by accessing your hero position. So you think, okay, so what does Meryl do? How does Meryl Streep go from one position to the next? What she's doing is changing how she holds her physical body, how she stands, how she gestures, what she thinks about, the images, the thoughts, the ideas going through her mind. She'll shift the language that she uses and does it very powerfully. So before she steps on set, she very well could have been talking to her kids, her agent, the director, grabbing a sandwich, and they go, Meryl, action, and wham! She changes her physical body, changes her thoughts, changes her language, and in that instant, boom, we believe her on camera. What I'm saying is success leaves clues, and we can borrow from these bomb technicians and borrow from Meryl to shift our state in an instant and go to our hero position. So I want you to really think about this. How do you have to show up when you are your best? When you are absolutely on fire and you know you can't fail, how do you show up? How do you stand? What do you think about? What do you say to yourself? How do you show up when you know you can't fail? Does that make sense? And so right now with me in our final few minutes here, please stand up right now if you can. Stand up right now. Or if you can't stand up or you're driving or something like that, in your car, sit up in your car, get ready. Now I want you to think about this question. How do you show up when you know you cannot fail? And part of you goes, I'm going to fail, right? So don't get killed device get in the way. Kind of bypass it for a second and just say to yourself, okay, if I could not fail, how would I show up? How would I stand if I could not fail? Now stand up right now, stand that way. If it was going exactly the way you wanted it, how would you stand? And stand that way right now. Notice, do you feel your feet on the ground? Are you solid? Notice, are your shoulders back? Is your head up? How's your breathing? Checking with all these different elements. How are you gesturing now? Are you moving a bit? Or are you standing still? Really feel it. Really notice, how do you stand? How do you gesture? How are you physically when you know you cannot fail? And now think of this. In your mind, picture, what are the thoughts and ideas and phrases that go through your mind? You think to yourself, I cannot fail. Do you see yourself winning? Do you see yourself saying, I can do this, I can make it happen? What are the memories or the thoughts or the ideas that go through your mind when you think about you being unbeatable? And finally, what are the words you use? Out loud, I can do this, I'm ready, I can handle it, this is my time, yes. Like, what are the phrases you use when you're absolutely in this hero position? Now, as you're making notes of this, how you stood, the thoughts and the words you use, write it down on a piece of paper right now and get a copy of your hero position. Write each of those things down, okay? Now, why am I making you do this? Because when the pressure strikes, I want you to immediately go into this position, physically, in your mind, and in your language. Do this consistently. The same way Meryl Streep would do it, the same way the bomb technicians would do it. I want you to step into your hero position. I want you to really embrace this place that Mariah Carey talks about in her famous song. There's a hero if you look inside your heart. You are more than capable of handling the pressure, becoming a master connector. All you have to do is step into that place. Understand, the pressure loop may never go away. It's thousands of years of evolution behind you. But we can lay new neural highways. The more we practice going into this hero position, the stronger and deeper the highways become in our mind, to the point where we can now associate feeling strong to when pressure shows up. If you get in the habit of stepping into this position, I promise you, you'll become a master connector and you'll find a way to win. Well, that went by pretty fast. I want to say thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege to be a part of your journey on your way to becoming a master connector. My intention really was to serve you and help you be more comfortable with getting uncomfortable as you make your way to becoming that master connector. So today we covered three things. Connect to your worth, get present with a keyword, and access your hero. If you do those three things, I am confident you will find a way to win and be your best when it matters most. If you want to stay in touch, for sure, check my email below or hit me up on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to hear what you thought of this talk today. Until then, all the best, and I'll see you next time.